And I think there's 3 Pro Bowl centers in this class, and I have the same exact grade on all 3 of the centers. Garrett Bradbury, Elgin Jenkins, and Eric McCoy, I have a 90 grade on all 3 centers. 6'3", 304 Bradbury, pass blocks, run blocks, zone blocks. He dominated the Senior Bowl. He built on his momentum with a fantastic combine, 34 reps in the bench press, 4.9, 340 time while dominating every drill except the kick slide drill. And I love Bradbury's tape versus Chris Slayton on Syracuse. I also liked what he did against Boston College this season. He just looks like a player that is going to be a franchise center. He reminds me a lot of Matt Burke. I think he could go as early as 13 to Miami. I would not be surprised. Carolina was a team I was considering as well prior to them getting Matt Paradis. They're obviously not going to take him at 16 now. Houston's got Nick Martin. I highly doubt he'd go 23rd, but that's definitely an option. Green Bay's got Corey Linsley. They could take him, but I doubt it. So if the Dolphins do not take him at 13, I think the next best fit will be the Rams at 31. Odds are he may go to the second round, but if the Rams need a center, and the Saints also need a center, so maybe the Saints will trade up for this guy, but you could definitely argue, before I get Joey's thoughts on these 3 centers, because I have the same grade on all 3 centers, I'm going to break down all 3 centers first. Elgin Jenkins, he's a pass blocker, 1 sack over 762 snaps at center in 2017 and 2018, can pretty much do everything on tape. He was able to keep Quentin Williams in check on running plays, and he kept his back straight. He can maintain blocks for a long period of time. He has experience at both offensive tackle spots. He can play all 5 spots in the offensive line like Martinez Rankin. And I love his tape a lot more than Rankin, to be completely honest. He struggled in the kick slide drill, but there are teams that could look at him and potentially add him. And then after the Elgin Jenkins, you've got Eric McCoy, who actually looked good against Quentin Williams on pass blocking plays, but struggled against him on run blocking plays. So I look at these centers. I have a 90 grade on all 3 of them. I think all 3 could be Pro Bowl centers, but these are the 3 best centers in this draft, and I have the exact same grade on all 3 centers. I mean, I think they all have their strengths. They all have some weaknesses, but overall, I think all 3 centers, these are the best 3 centers in this year's draft. And regardless of what order you rank them in, I think these are the best 3 centers. So studying these 3 guys, Garrett Bradbury, Elgin Jenkins, and Eric McCoy, which of these 3 centers do you think is the best center in this class and why? And you can give your input on this too, Kerm, since you watched Alabama football. I mean, Jenkins, Mississippi State, McCoy, Texas A&M, both played against Alabama, so you can give your input on this too, Kerm. But which of these 3 centers do you think is the best center in this year's class and why?
I think Jenkins is the best center because he is the most complete center. Like you said, kick slide drill is like, what the hell is he kick sliding to? Into the right guard, into the left guard? Centers don't kick slide much. Now, he may be called upon to pull, in which, the 3-cone drill would probably be pretty important in that situation to see how tightly he runs the corners on a pull. But overall, I don't think that the kick slide drill is as important for centers as it is for a tackle or even a guard. So I think Jenkins is the best out of the center class this year. Yeah, I'm going to agree with Joey.
Yeah, most people had Elgin Jenkins as a top center. To be completely honest, they only moved Bradbury ahead of Jenkins because Bradbury dominated the combine. But based on the tape, I'd argue Jenkins is the best center. But honestly, I would not be surprised if 2 of these centers went in the first round, or even all 3 of them, because I think the talent's there. And I think it's a lot closer than people think. But I would argue Jenkins is the best floor, and Bradbury's probably their ceilings all equal. But I'd argue based on tape alone that Elgin Jenkins is the best floor. Now, after Jenkins, who's the second best center, Bradbury or McCoy, and how close is this gap between them and the center? How close or wide would you say the gap is between Elgin Jenkins and the next center?
I don't think the gap's that close, honestly. I don't even know.
So would you say it's Jenkins or Bradbury would be your number 2 center in your personal opinion? Because I have the same grade on all 3 centers, but I think Bradbury gets drafted first. But I think you could argue Jenkins is the best tape, but it's very close. The gap's not that.
I rely more on tape than I do anything else. So, yeah, the tape's pretty important.
But I'm saying, have you seen Bradbury or McCoy?
Why did the Browns get Baker Mayfield? Because John Dorsey watched the tape. He didn't go along with all this other crap that is talked about. You know, drills are good indicators, but the tape, why is Dorsey probably going to win Executive of the Year here next year? Because he watches the tape. How was he able to build the Chiefs the way he did? Watch the tape. So, you know, it's the tape. Dude. Watch the tape. Old school football guys, watch the tape. Oh, sorry. Hey, I was arguing baseball with an ex-friend of mine. So I did not catch that the last bit that y'all was talking about.
So you still haven't answered my question. We talked about the tape, but Garrett Bradbury versus Eric McCoy, who do you think has the better tape? Bradbury, I agree with that assessment. Eric McCoy would probably be center 3 in this class, but I think those are the 3 best centers, and I think the gap between 1 and 3 is very thin. I would not be surprised if McCoy was the first center picked and then Bradbury was the third. But I think they all have the same potential grade. But after those 3, I think the next guy that's worth mentioning is Ross Pierschbacher. And this is a guy who played left guard and he moved to center. And I really like his tape. That being said, he didn't struggle in the Senior Bowl. He struggled in the Combine. It didn't show his strength and footwork needed to be corrected. But I think he's capable of being a starting center, but you could also argue he's raw and his ceiling's limited. But I think he could be a starting center at the next level. I love his leadership, his work ethic, his ability to commit to the game of football and grow as a person. I think Pierschbacher, Alabama center, could be a future starter and a guy you get in the 3rd or 4th round. I know Jeremiah had a 5th round grade on him, but I think the versatility and the leadership is there. Go ahead, Kerm. You're the Alabama expert.
From what I saw, I think he played better as a guard.
I would agree with that.
I would have him play more as a guard in the next level. Instead of focusing on center.
Interesting take by Kerman. He watches Alabama football a lot, so if he thinks Pierschbacher is a better guard, he may end up playing guard. Lamont Gallard out of Georgia is my number 5 center in this draft. And Joey, do you want to say anything about Pierschbacher before I move? You know what? I'm on Gallard. You can give your thoughts after I read the Gallard report. But Gallard had great tape. But my weakness is he possesses very heavy feet and he's got a limited football IQ. He needs to get stronger. His footwork also needs to improve. I had a 4th-round grade on him. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl. He didn't do the bench press at the 40 time at the combine. But I loved his tape was good enough to warrant a starter grade. But I think he's got a very limited ceiling, though, like Pierschbacher. He's raw. He's talented enough to be a future starter, but he's a borderline starter, in my opinion. And I think those 2 players are players to keep an eye on. Any thoughts on those guys before I get to the Ohio State center and then read off the names in the rest of this list? Have you watched Pierschbacher or Gallard, Joey? Have you watched Pierschbacher or Gallard?
I don't even know who Gallard is.
He's a Georgia center. All right.
Yeah, I know Pierschbacher. I like Pierschbacher. I think he'll be a really good backup. I mean, I think he can be a spot starter. He's got potential, but I don't see him as big time anything.
And then the final center, Michael Jordan out of Ohio State. I hope the Bears draft him so Chicago makes a bunch of Michael Jordan puns. I think it'd be hopeful.
6'6", 220 pounds, the greatest center in history. When did time travel become a thing? I knew he was North Carolina basketball grad.
Well, he's now an Ohio State football graduate, 6'6", 312 pounds. He played center, left guard, and right guard in college at Ohio State, but he had an offensive tackle weigh-in at the combine. And he might be able to play all 5 spots in the O-line like Elgin Jenkins. And he might end up being the 2nd center drafted. Michael Jordan has to improve his foot. I feel like I'm insulting the actual greatest player of all time in NBA by telling people that Michael Jordan, the Ohio State center, needs to improve his footwork. I feel like I'm insulting the greatest player to ever play basketball by critiquing his footwork.
Well, here's the thing, Chris. You can tell these people's parents grew up in the 90s and they were probably Bulls fans. Because there are a lot of Michael Jordans that we're finding coming out around here.
Yeah. Either that or Jason Jordan is such a common last name. And it wouldn't surprise me if we see more of a Chipper Joneses in the Southeast coming up. And the Super Jones with their brains. But I agree with Joey's statement. Yeah, a lot of people were Bulls fans in the 90s because of Jordan. So a lot of people are naming their kids Michael.
Yep, and Michael Jordan.
Let's face it, I'm gonna put it out there. I know I'm switching to basketball real quick, but I'm gonna tell you why Michael Jordan was able to be so much of a better player overall. Maybe not physical specimen than LeBron James, a better player, because in real life, outside of the basketball court and on it, Michael Jordan was a freaking asshole. Still is. Even Charles Barkley said, yeah, Michael's an asshole. LeBron's a nice guy. LeBron's a really good guy. Does a lot of good things. When Michael went to the refs, he was not whining. He was like, this is what you have to do. This is what happened. This is what you need to watch. When LeBron's like, why didn't you make the call? What's wrong with you? Like, yeah, so it's like LeBron whines. LeBron cries. Like, Jordan didn't go to other teams because Jordan's like, I was drafted for the Bulls. I wanted championships with the Bulls. I'll make a dynasty with the Bulls. I don't need him. LeBron had to go to play with Wayne Wade. Still can't get stars to play with him. So, you know, it's the attitude. Jordan's like, I'm going to be the best, and I don't need to go to another team. I'm just going to pull the Bulls along. LeBron's like, I need to go to other teams. You know, so being a nice guy, and you can be a great player as a nice guy. You cannot be the best of all time, but a nice guy. It's like, how many people have LeBron James punched in the face while suffering a concussion and while still playing, along with a broken orbital bone? None. He gets carried off the court with cramp. Larry Bird breaks his orbital bone, comes back and leads his team to a victory. Concussion, orbital bone, just walks straight past the coach, straight to the, table, checks himself back into the game, straight out of the locker room. After smashing his head against the ground, LeBron gets carried off by an injury. Not with an injury, but with a cramp. Larry Bird is a little bit of an asshole.
Yeah, and he's carried off by 3, 4 big people.
Yeah. Larry Bird was a bit of an asshole. And Larry Bird walked off the court by himself. And so it's like, why is LeBron never going to be the greatest player ever? Let's face it, LeBron doesn't have that killer instinct. LeBron's not an asshole. LeBron's not going to to anywhere. He's always going to have that, extra lift to him. Bird had his players, great core nucleus. But you can see without him out there, team faltered.
Hey, Joey, how much would you say that also Michael Jordan had to work for everything? LeBron really hasn't. Michael Jordan was coming from the high school basketball team as a freshman.
Yeah, and that comes with LeBron.
So he knew how to work for everything.
Yeah, and that comes with LeBron being a physical freak. He was, and to this day, is a man among boys. That is where the majority of his points come from, the majority of his rebounds. He is a man among boys in this generation. You put him against guys like Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, Hakeem Olajuwon, Larry Bird, in that generation, he's not going to do as much. He tries to pull the crap he does now, like run into the lane. I guarantee it, little 6'1" Isaiah Thomas is going to knock his ass on the ground. I mean, he would not be able to body him up. He would not be able to out-physical them. He would not be a man among boys because there were a lot of men in the game back in the 80s and 90s, and those men would have knocked the crap out of him. Bill Laimbeer would have clotheslined his ass and said, come at me again, son. And that's, so you wouldn't have this LeBron knowing he can bully everybody because he wouldn't be able to bully everybody, because the mentality has changed. You have a lot of divas now. And Jordan had to get tough. He was a bit of a diva when he came in. Let's face it, he was. Then he ran into the Detroit Pistons and the Boston Celtics. He got beat up. He got beat up a lot. And he learned, I got to become a little bit of an asshole. And you know what? Served him well. You know, it's
you got to be assertive and dominant. I mean,
unless you play against that killer instinct, and that killer instinct is not in that game right now when it comes to the NBA. So, I mean, that's the big thing. You know, I think the killer instinct, the last of the killer instinct retired with Tim Duncan.
Yeah, and most people don't want to show that intensity anymore with the millennials and the new generations and social media. Most people don't want to showcase that intensity and go through that adversity and the growing pains anymore. And that's part of life. That's part of life. That's not just part of sports. That's part of life.
Yeah, and let's face it right now, the NBA, you know, you can say it's good for the NFL to, you know, limit some of the shit. Because that's dangerous. But the NBA has just like gotten soft. You know, a lot of NFL players go, oh, the NFL has gotten soft. Well, you'll thank them in 30 years. You know, probably sooner. You know, where the NBA is just like, well, our guys are whining. You know, so you've got to change the rules to make it easier. You know, you don't have a lot of injuries. You didn't even have a lot of injuries in the NBA back in the day. You know, at least, you know, you had leg injuries all over the place, obviously. But, you know, you didn't have a lot of, you know, life-altering injuries back in the day.
And players will sit out of a game due to something as minor as a cramp.
Really, yeah, it's like now a cramp is a life-altering injury. You know, all of a sudden. You know, it's like,
there's a reason. There's a reason
LeBron, you're not a pregnant woman. Stop it. You're not going to get the sympathy. You're not going to get people, you know, helping you around and everything. You know, it's, you know, they have it a lot tougher than you do. Okay, so stop.
There's a reason LeBron James is the face whenever you try to compare injuries with sports. He's the face of the basketball injury on the memes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like, but the thing is, you know, it's like the pregnant woman analogy. Pregnant women are a lot tougher than LeBron James, but yet LeBron James will make you think he is going through the exact same thing a woman is. And that is, to me, you know, that's just showing, look, you're just trying to get at stuff, you're trying to get sympathy. You know, it hurts. I get it. You know, you don't need 4 people carrying you off. Ain't that bad. I've had cramps. You know, I picked my damn full self off the ground, and I lift myself to the sideline. Got it taken care of. Okay? You know, LeBron, you're not that tough. You know, you're not getting sympathy. Especially from the
Send you a message, Joey.
Yeah.
Hey, Joey, check your messages.
Okay, I will in a little while. But
no, it just proves exactly what we are talking about.
Okay. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that works too.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And you've got Michael Jordan. We're going to quickly read through the rest of these centers, and then we can get to the and if you want to mention some of them, I think the rest of these centers after Michael Jordan are backups. But you got Keegan Render out of Iowa, who I think could be a very good backup. I like him as a backup. I think he could be a very good backup. And then Jesse Burkett, Stanford. This is where the drop-off begins to take place. It's kind of depressing. Then you've got John Baker, Boston College team captain, 6'3", 290. I think he's going to be a nice backup. Sean Krebs, 6'5", 325, did not get a combine invite. He may even go undrafted. It's very sensitive elbows. I don't know how that's going to play for guard, but he played center next to Austin Corbett. But he's got to show people he can be the man. Sam Mustafer from Notre Dame, he did not get a combine invite, but he took over for Nick Martin at center the past 3 years at Notre Dame. And Mustafer's one of these players that could be a player who is worth keeping an eye on. John Kenoy out of Western Michigan, 6'3", 300 pounds. I see him as a backup. Did not get a combine invite. Justin Falcinelli out of Clemson, 6'4", 315. He looked good. He held his own versus South Carolina, but he could not do that versus Alabama. And his zone blocking needs to improve. And then finally, to round up our final two centers, we've got James O'Hagan out of Buffalo and TJ McCoy out of Florida, who is mainly a rotational center. So, I mean, after Michael Jordan, this center class really begins to take its toll in terms of talent. I mean, there's 15 centers in my center rankings. Last year, we only had 10 centers in the center rankings. This year, you have 15. There's 15 that could be drafted, but there's only 6 that could, out of the 15 that could be starters. So I think as far as depth, this is the thinnest position outside of quarterback. This is probably the thinnest position in terms of talent and finding starters. Like if you're looking for starters at center, you should just keep what you have and wait until 2020 or wait until a better opportunity presents itself. But some teams don't have that luxury. Any final thoughts on these center rankings before I call the Google Hangout a show? Any final thoughts on some of the backup players I mentioned or whatever? They're backups. Okay. We'll end the Google Hangout on that note and go back to Talk Shoe.